Friends and family, have you ever had an experience with a client that was both enlightening, shocking, and eye-opening? I guess that's three things, right? All at the same time? Well, I remember one time I walked into a client's office and the first thing they said to me was kind of shocking. I introduced myself and they said, "Oh, great. You're here to tell us what we're doing wrong." So the question I have for you today is, did you get into this profession to tell people what they did wrong? Did you get into this profession to tell people what they did wrong? Are you ready to have that discussion? Let's go.
Welcome to Audit Bites, the podcast that helps auditors become awesome. Join us for bite-sized info and education to excel in your auditing career.
Well, all right. You heard the question that I asked and heard the story. You heard the story that I told and the question that I posed. I walked into a client's office one time. They looked at me and they said, "Oh, great. You're here to tell us what we're doing wrong." So, my question for my fellow auditors today is, did you get into the auditing profession to tell people what they're doing wrong? Welcome to episode number 63 of Audit Bites. Some auditors have assurance all wrong. Now, before we get started, let me just take a pause for one moment. Clarence is here today, and Clarence says, "Greetings from Freeport, Bahamas." Clarence, I hope that you are on vacation. And if you are on vacation, my friend, I hope that you are having fun. Let's catch up at some point in time. Really, really soon. Really, really soon. Okay, so now the question is, though, Clarence, answer the question for me, Clarence, man. Did you become an auditor to simply tell people what they did wrong? You see, because a lot of people think that that is the primary responsibility of an auditor. Recently, I was doing a presentation in Columbus, Ohio for about 500 auditors, and I asked a seemingly simple question. Did you become an auditor to tell people what they did wrong? And most people in the room said no, but there was one person that raised her hand up very proudly and she said, "Yes." Now, after that, we had a productive dialogue. You see, I've done this presentation all over the world at this point, and there are only a few people who actually say yes to that. So I asked her, why is pointing out what people are doing wrong so important? Seems like a fair question, right? Why is pointing out what people are doing wrong so important? Now, her answer was very telling and very touching all at the same time. She said that she wanted to help them get better. And so then my next question to her was, what if nothing is wrong? And all I got from the crowd were blank stares. In that moment, all I got from the crowd were blank stares. Now, what I'm about to say next is probably going to be a little bit controversial, especially for old school auditors, but if you bear with me, I will connect the dots. So what I'm about to say might be a little controversial, but as an auditor, it is not our job to always, quote unquote, find something wrong. It is not our job to always find something wrong. And if you think that that is your job, then stay tuned, because in the next 45 minutes to maybe an hour, we're going to tell you what our job really is. Because for so many years, so many of us have been taught your job is to go in and find things that are wrong with the areas that you're auditing. Well, stick with me, because I'm about to tell you why that makes absolutely no sense. Being accessible is on YouTube. I'm assuming that that's Warner. Is that you, my friend? She said, good to see you. It is good to see you too. Now, Shri is over on YouTube as well. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, why? Go on over there and subscribe to it. Go on over there and subscribe to it. Now, Wilson says it's a very interesting topic. All right. Clarence says, no, but I have no problem telling them. So, in other words, Clarence does not believe that our primary responsibility is to find something wrong, but he has no problem telling people when there is something wrong. And Shri says, I can imagine there are people out there who thrive off telling others what's wrong. Yeah, there are some, but that's not our primary responsibility. And Leslie Hamburg is here and she says, good afternoon, with the sunshine emoji. And Leslie, I do hope that it is sunshiny where you are. I think it is because you're in the Carolinas. So I don't think you have a storm to worry about. And Clarence says he agrees with me. It's not our primary responsibility to find something wrong. But you know what? It is our responsibility to find something. You see, we are fact finders, not fault finders. Now, when we find the facts, sometimes there may be some fault. Other times, there may not be any fault. So, needless to say, we were a little shocked in the middle of this presentation when this young lady said, hey, and I'm not making fun of her or anything because we actually had a productive and constructive conversation about it. And I told her it was going to be a topic of an upcoming podcast because you can't make this stuff up. Some people believe that it is our job to find things. Now, what I found even more interesting, though, is when I dug a little bit deeper and asked her, why is that important? She said that she just wanted to help improve things, which led me to my next point in that presentation. Most of us get in this job because we truly want to help. How many of you listening got into the audit profession because you really wanted to help people? Not to fault find, but to fact find. If you got into this profession because you did it, because you wanted to help, let me know. Drop a thumbs up, drop a heck yes. Give me some emoji, some sign, or some text to let me know that that is the reason you got into this profession. I know I'm not the only one. Again, we are fact finders, not fault finders. So, with that said, what are we going to cover today? I'm glad you asked. First thing we're going to do is we're going to define assurance. You hear this term thrown around all the time. We are assurance providers. And in order to provide assurance, we have to tell people what's wrong. No, that's a joke. That's a joke. We are assurance providers. So we're going to define assurance. Then we're going to explore why a lot of us have it all wrong. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to define what assurance really is. What assurance really is. I knew it was you. I knew it was you. Yet now, Wilson, I know you can't say that. It is your job to understand what is wrong. But in our jobs, we don't even know if anything is wrong yet. Those of you who don't know Wilson, he's a pain management physician. One of the best around. Pain management physician. One of the best around. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with defining assurance, because as auditors, they call us assurance providers, but do we really even know what the word assurance means? Let's go to dictionary.com. Dictionary.com defines it as, well, it's a noun, of course, and it's a positive declaration intended to give confidence. So, okay, my fellow audit professionals, if you believe that our job is to point out what is wrong, then that goes directly against the definition of assurance. You see, it is a positive declaration intended to give confidence. A positive declaration. Okay. But let's look at multiple definitions of this word assurance: a promise or a pledge, a guarantee, a surety. So are we guaranteeing that things are bad when we do audits, or are we guaranteeing that things are good? Do we make guarantees as auditors? You see, words matter. I know we live in a world where people can just make up words and assign anything to any value that they want to, but words actually do have meaning, contrary to popular belief. So let's look at a third definition: full confidence, freedom from doubt, certainty. Now, auditors, let me ask you a question. When we do our work, do we provide absolute assurance? Do we provide full confidence, freedom from doubt? I don't think we do, but here's what the definition of the word is. Let's go to a fourth definition: freedom from timidity, self confidence, belief in one's abilities. Now, this one probably doesn't apply to us at all, but our last definition: presumptuous boldness. Now that doesn't apply to us either, but look at the antonym for the word assurance, and that is uncertainty. Okay, now if we're looking at the definition of assurance, and they call us assurance providers, the core definition goes against what many of us do and or believe nowadays, because a lot of us believe that our job is to find something wrong. I remember having one audit job. It was really funny. We would go in and audit departments, and sometimes we would come back empty handed, because you don't always find something, because there's not always something wrong. And the manager would look at us and say, "You better go back until you find something." Now, does that really make sense? Especially if the definition of the word assurance is a positive declaration intended to give confidence, unless we're trying to give confidence that something is just absolutely wrong, even when it isn't. So now, if this weren't enough, this was from dictionary.com. So let's check Merriam-Webster, because we all like Webster, right? So Webster defines assurance as the state of being assured. The state of being assured. It goes on to say, such as a being certain in the mind, or confidence of mind or manner, easy freedom from self-doubt or uncertainty. So that means if we're going to find confidence, we have to be very objective. So if we're going in as auditors with the objective to find something, we're not being objective in our audit approach. And isn't objectivity one of the primary foundational pillars of our standards? So if we are going to be objective when we provide assurance, we can't go in with the thought of we're always looking for something to be wrong. Just doesn't make sense. It just does not match the definitions of assurance. Let's look at another definition: something that inspires or tends to inspire confidence. Okay. Another definition: the act or action of assuring someone or something, such as a pledge or a guarantee. So listen, if we're going in to audit an area and we're just pledging up front that we're going to find something, how is that providing someone with assurance? Because we may not find anything, because there may not be anything wrong. So those are our definitions of assurance. So let's go back to our takeaways from today. We're going to define assurance. We just did that. And we see that assurance, the true definition, may not fit the practice of some internal auditors, right? Now we're going to explore why we have assurance all wrong. And we got a thumbs up from Leslie. I asked earlier, how many of us did not get into the business to actually point out what people were doing wrong? Most of us got into this business to help. And I asked you, thumbs up, give me some emojis, let me know. Leslie is giving a thumbs up. Glad to know I'm not the only one, Leslie. And that means I'm in really good company, because if you guys don't know Leslie, she's a highly respected audit director. Highly respected audit director. So now, let's explore why some of us have got assurance all wrong. And before we do that, let's go back to the definition. The act or action of assuring someone or something, such as a pledge or a guarantee. Now, as auditors, do you guarantee that something is wrong when you're auditing organizations? Do you guarantee that nothing is wrong? What is your guarantee after you perform an audit? I'm not going to answer that just yet. Just food for thought. If you have any thoughts, drop them into the chat and let me know what you think. So before we dive deep into this, let's define who are assurance providers. Who are assurance providers? By the way, let me mention one other thing. So I went to the dictionary and said, let's look up the term assurance provider. Do you know the word assurance is in the dictionary? The word provider is in the dictionary, but the term assurance provider is not in the dictionary. Just a little food for thought. What do you all think that means, or what do you think that says? We'll get to that in just one moment, but just food for thought. Think about that for just one moment. Assurance provider is not in the dictionary. Okay, so who are our common assurance providers? Well, the obvious one is external auditors. They conduct financial audits to verify the accuracy of financial statements and to ensure they are prepared in accordance with accounting standards. So they're providing assurance over the financial statements, just the numbers, right? Then we have internal auditors. Well, we perform internal audits to evaluate the effectiveness and efficiency of internal controls, risk management, and governance processes within an organization. Then you also have compliance auditors. They assess whether an organization is adhering to regulatory requirements and or internal policies. After that, you have your IT auditors. Well, they review information technology systems and controls, right? Nowadays, we also have environmental auditors. They evaluate an organization's compliance with environmental regulations and the effectiveness of its environmental management systems. And now, last but not least, or at least the last one that I want to talk about and put on the list, right? Quality auditors. They examine processes and systems to ensure that they meet specified quality standards. So those are your assurance providers, and they do some sort of audit work to give us some kind of assurance of something. So in other words, they're going out and pointing out everything that every organization is doing wrong, right? No, that's not what they're doing. But before we go even further, let's talk about what are the key aspects of assurance. Because we just said that these 6 groups of individuals right here are responsible for providing assurance. So what are the key aspects of assurance? Well, our first aspect of assurance is independence. The assurance provider must be independent to a certain extent to be reasonably assured that they are objective and impartial. Objectivity is important because you have to have an open mind. What we're doing are assessments. Those assessments might lead us to a conclusion that something is wrong or that nothing is wrong. So independence and objectivity is what this should say. But independence and objectivity are aspects of assurance. The second aspect is you got to have a systemic process or a systematic process. Assurance involves a structured approach to collecting and evaluating evidence against predefined criteria. If your process is not systematic, then it calls into question the results that you report. So in order to be an assurance provider, you need independence, you need a systematic process. On top of that, you need evidence-based conclusions. You cannot just pull a conclusion out of thin air. You have to have evidence to support the conclusions that you reach. Now, after you reach some conclusions, you got to do some reporting. You have to report back to your stakeholders. Whoever those stakeholders are, they're relying on your results in order to form a conclusion, take an action. So you have to have some sort of reporting. And then, oh goodness, okay, that's wrong. That should not say environmental auditors. After your reporting, you have confidence building. So for those of you watching, number 5 says environmental auditors, just ignore that. Number 5 should be confidence building. Now, what I mean by that is your stakeholders who are relying on the results that you've reported to them based on your evidence-based conclusion, because you have a systematic process and you are objective and independent, they need confidence in you as an assurance provider to believe and buy into the results that you have provided. So now, if you're still with me, and if all of this seems in line with what you believe, let me know. Tell me, yeah, I'm with you. Or say, hold up, nope, you have no idea what you're talking about. There's always that one. It's like you have no idea what you are talking about. But if I don't know what I'm talking about, then why is there such a stigma surrounding our profession? Why is there such a stigma to where, like I said earlier, I stepped into a client's office and they looked at me and said, oh, great. Now you're going to tell us everything that we are doing wrong. And they aren't the only ones. A lot of people believe that our primary function is to point fingers, is to find fault. We are not fault finders. We are fact finders. And so your key aspects of assurance: 1, independence; 2, a systematic process; 3, evidence-based conclusions; 4, some sort of reporting back to your stakeholders; and 5, building confidence in them as it relates to your abilities to perform the job. But why is there a stigma surrounding our job? Why is it that people believe that we're only coming in to point out what they are doing wrong? I'm going to give you quite a few reasons as to why there is a stigma surrounding the work that we do. So, are you ready to find out the reasons that there's a stigma behind what we do? And some of it is 100% our fault. Some of it is not our fault, but if we know and understand what those stigmas are, we can do damage control. Now, Marsha is here, and Marsha says facts and truth freak people out. You got that right. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't have the phrase, don't shoot the messenger. Oftentimes, when you deliver full truths to people, they turn around and blame you. I can tell you through firsthand experience as an auditor, I have experienced that before. It happens, but we have to continue to speak the truth. You ever notice that oftentimes a lie spreads faster than the truth? You ever believed something about someone for years, and then after so many years, you find out that that thing that you believed was 100% absolutely wrong? Now, I predict that in the next 10 years, especially those of us who live in the United States, we're going to find out a lot of things that we once believed that were lies, especially when you look at as the statute of limitations expires on a lot of things, and as certain documents that were sealed become unsealed. That's why I believe that auditors are some of the most honest people in the world because we are fact finders and we like to figure out what the actual truth is. Not my truth and not your truth. My truth really doesn't exist. It's just my version of the truth based on the information that I have at that particular point in time. Your truth does not exist. It is simply your version of the truth based on the information that you have at that particular point in time. The truth really does exist. And in order to get to the truth, we have to be willing to put my truth to the side to hear someone else's side of a story. But very few of us want to do that. I didn't mean to break into that little tangent, but Marsha really made me think about that when she said facts and truth freak people out. Now, for my internal auditors listening, this should give you a clue as to why people freak you, why you freak people out. Sorry. It's because oftentimes we like to be fact finders and find the truth unfiltered, regardless of feelings, regardless of our feelings, regardless of someone else's feelings. We are like that best friend that will tell you when that outfit doesn't look good on you. that is what we're like most of the time. So, why the stigma surrounding the auditing profession? Why the stigma surrounding the auditing profession? Now, for those of you who are listening to the podcast on the podcasting platform, I'm laughing now because people over on YouTube and the people on LinkedIn, they are dropping some very interesting things in the chat. And I'm going to read those in just a few moments because I have some very comical friends and I appreciate them for chiming in when I do this podcast because I think we all get better together. I learn a lot from you and I just share what I know and hopefully someone learns something from me. But let's talk about why the stigma. The first reason for the stigma is historical precedents. You see, over time, a lot of high-profile financial scandals and failures have highlighted instances where auditors or other assurance providers missed significant issues. This has led to a perception that if nothing is found during an audit, it may suggest a lack of thoroughness or diligence. So because of historical precedents, now people expect auditors to find something. Do you find that that is true, my fellow auditing professionals? Now, back to the comments. Shree said, yes, you did mean to get into that tangent. No, I didn't. How would I know that Marsha would say what she said? Now, Clarence says, that's why I always say there are three sides to a story. My side, your side, and then you have the truth. Yeah. And Clarence also says, someone will be close to the truth. Yeah, somebody's going to always be close to it. But here's what happens. Many people get offended and get trapped in their own feelings. And so they block off the truth. They don't want to hear the absolute, full, and total truth. And whenever I meet somebody like that, I get the heck away from them because that means that they're more emotionally led than logically led. We're all emotional to some point. But if you can't control your own emotions, there's no telling what you might do as a person. And I don't want to be around you when you get irrational. I'm not here to control another adult's unstable, irrational emotions. Not my job. You don't pay me enough to do that. You are not a comedian. Well, you might be a comedian. Tree says she is not a comedian. I mean, she is a comedian. She is a comedian. Now, Marsha says, when employees and employers hear it's audit time, they are very cagey and are not ready to be inspected, as they may know there's something wrong that would be found. Yeah, that happens too. That happens too, right? There could be something wrong, but what happens if there is nothing wrong? So the first reason there's a stigma is historical precedents. The second reason there's a stigma is expectation gaps. There's often a gap between what the public expects from assurance providers and what their actual responsibilities entail. Many people may expect auditors to detect all fraud and errors, whereas the actual scope of an audit is to provide reasonable assurance surrounding controls, financial statements, compliance, etc. We'll get into that in just a few moments. So now your third reason for the stigma is regulatory or legal pressures. Assurance providers operate in highly regulated environments with significant legal liabilities. The pressure to find something may be high. And I would argue that sometimes it's so high, you might get to a point where you're expending more in resources than it's actually worth in cost. That goes back to that whole concept of reasonable assurance, but we'll talk about that in just a few moments. Now, your fourth reason for the stigma is media influence. Media coverage tends to focus on negative findings or failures. Now, that reinforces the idea that audits and reviews are primarily about uncovering problems. Positive audit reports would probably receive far less attention. So if you're just joining us, there's a stigma surrounding auditors. Most people believe, even some auditors believe, that your job is to 100% always find something wrong. That's not your job. So we're talking about right now why this stigma exists. 1, historical precedents. 2, expectation gaps. 3, regulatory and legal pressures. 4, media influence. And the 5th one is client expectations. Client expectations. Some clients may expect that assurance providers will identify areas for improvement. Now, that can happen, but that's not your primary expectation. Even if no significant issues exist, they still have this belief. This can create a perception that finding something wrong is part of the value provided by assurance providers. Now, our last reason is, professional skepticism. Assurance providers are trained to exercise professional skepticism, meaning that we approach our work with a questioning mindset to do a critical assessment of evidence. And this mindset can sometimes be perceived as being overly focused on finding issues. Or for some of us, we may just dig and dig and dig until there is nothing left to dig. Now, Marcia asked a really good question. She says, what is the scope of an audit? Isn't it to ensure the books are good and everything is above board? So now, Marcia, that depends on what type of auditor you're talking about. When you're talking about an external auditor, their primary job is to take a look at the financial statements and to provide an opinion as to whether the numbers presented reasonably represent the actual condition of the organization. So that means they're not going to find everything that's wrong. So they may not look at things that are below a certain dollar amount because they may be deemed to be immaterial. Or it means that certain things they may not look at in depth anyway. Let me give you an example. Say if I'm a huge conglomerate, say if I'm a $1 trillion organization and I go and buy a company that only makes $500,000 a year. Now, while to you and I, $500,000 is a whole lot of money, but to a $1 trillion organization, it may be immaterial, and your auditors may not focus on that $500,000 organization as heavily. Now, there could be fraud in that organization, but because you have to use your resources wisely, it might be wise for you to only do a cursory review of the $500,000 organization because you still have trillions of dollars over here on the other side that you're looking at. So you're not going to say that everything is above board. It has to be reasonable. It has to be material. So that's kind of how That's kind of how that works. All right. So now for those of you listening, because I know there's a lot of you that listen on Apple Podcasts, and there's quite a few of you that listen on Spotify. There's quite a few of you that listen in other countries too. And for that, I have to always say thank you. I'm just so surprised by that, but thank you. Marsha said, maybe it's the facial expression of of the auditors. That's now, now, Marsha, I think this is a friendly face. I mean, so people, the stigma exists because it's the facial expression of the auditors. Now that was funny. That was funny. So that is why the stigma exists, or 6 reasons. I'm sure that there are more, but those are 6 reasons why the stigma exists, that auditors always have to find something wrong. 6 reasons. But listen, to mitigate this stigma, it's very important to understand and communicate the true purpose and scope of our assurance activities. That's why I'm really glad Marsha asked that question. And so realistically, the scope of most assurance activities is to provide an independent and objective evaluation of information and processes. That's pretty much the case across the board. Now, it gets a little bit more specific depending on what you're actually looking at. But let's go back to our takeaways for today. First, we wanted to define assurance. And like I said earlier, assurance, well, the way we actually conduct assurance activities does not fall in line with the definition of assurance. How does it? We wanted to explore why we have it wrong, and we just gave 6 reasons why the stigma exists. Now we want to define what assurance really is. But before we do that, here's what I want to say to my fine audit friends. If you like this podcast / training / get together between audit friends, whatever we're calling this, right? Tell your friends. You can go to my website, thatauditguy.com, and find where we're syndicated. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on LinkedIn. But go and subscribe to us on your favorite platform, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, wherever that is. The other thing I want you to do is tell your friends. And the third thing I would like for you to do, if you like this style of presenting, call me up. Call me up for your local IIA chapter needs. Refer me to friends, especially companies who have 10 or more auditors who need training. We can help you get your training in, and it will be customized and tailored to your environment. But those are things that I'd like for you to do for me if you are enjoying this. So, okay, let's define what assurance really is. Let's define what assurance really is. So, give me just one moment, my friends. I have to take a look at something here, because I think, give me just one moment here, friends. Okay. Let's define what assurance is. We have a lot of organizations that try to give us the definition of assurance. For example, the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board defines assurance as, well, or an insurance engagement, as an engagement in which a practitioner aims to obtain sufficient, appropriate evidence in order to express a conclusion designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended users other than the responsible party about the subject matter information. Now, I don't know about you all, but that's a whole lot of words. And did anybody actually understand what that meant? Did anyone actually understand what all that meant? But okay, let's suppose we were confused by that. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants defines assurance services as independent professional services that improve the quality of information or its context for decision makers. Now, let me just go back to where we started. We started by saying that some people believe, and some auditors believe, that it's our job to find something wrong. Now, the AICPA is saying that assurance services are independent professional services that improve the quality of information or its context for decision makers. Now, if someone at an organization is providing us with information, I don't know how we improve the quality other than the fact that we evaluate it and we say, okay, this seems reasonable, or this does not seem reasonable, and here's something else that might seem a little bit more reasonable. But either way, what if, like I said earlier, what if everything is okay? What if there's nothing to improve? So this definition kind of leads us down the path of, should we always be looking to improve something? I mean, granted, it is a benefit if we can, but is that always our goal? Is that always our objective? So now, the International Federation of Accountants describes assurance engagements as engagements in which a practitioner aims to obtain sufficient, appropriate evidence in order to express a conclusion. Wait a minute now. I kind of like this one. Now, if they had stopped here, I would have been very much so on board with them, but they didn't stop there. So they added more to it. So assurance engagements are engagements in which a practitioner aims to obtain sufficient, appropriate evidence in order to express a conclusion designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended users about the outcome of the evaluation. What? So we're enhancing the degree of confidence. Now, that still makes it sound like we're making it where they can actually rely on the evidence. But do we actually produce the evidence? Is it our job to actually enhance it? Okay, so now Marcia is saying that's a vague definition. Whew, I know, right? Very vague. But if you hang on with me, I'm going to give you my definition of what assurance is. You can tell me if you believe it or if you think I'm full of it. But I can guarantee you it makes more sense than many of these definitions. Now, let's get to one of my favorite organizations. Let's see what the Institute of Internal Auditors says first about assurance and then about assurance providers. I've spent the bulk of my career as an internal auditor, so obviously this is one of my go-to organizations, but let's look at what they had to say. They defined assurance as a statement intended to increase the level of stakeholders' confidence about an organization's governance, risk management, and control processes over an issue, condition, subject matter, or activity under review when compared to established criteria. Whew. Okay, so let me get this straight. So it's a statement intended to increase the level of stakeholder confidence. Well, if we find something wrong, wouldn't that decrease the stakeholders' confidence in the organization's governance processes? I'm just kind of talking kind of commonsensical here. But if we go in and we audit and we find something wrong, wouldn't that kind of decrease their level of confidence in the organization's governance? Oh, wait a minute. So maybe we're saying here, though, if we go in and we audit something, we find something wrong, and then we make some recommendations. Based on our recommendations, we increase the stakeholders' level of confidence. But how many of you as auditors have gone in and made recommendations and they said, we hate your recommendations, that's not what we want to do, you don't run the business? Because we don't run their business. I'm just throwing that out there. That's a whole topic of discussion that we've talked about before, and I might do another episode on that piece alone, audit recommendations. Okay, so the Institute of Internal Auditors has said that a statement intended to increase the level of stakeholders' confidence about an organization's governance, risk management, and control processes over an issue, condition, that's a long definition, but how did they define assurance services? So assurance services are services through which internal auditors perform objective assessments to provide assurance. Okay, that's kind of circular there, but they go on and say examples of assurance services include compliance, financial, operational / performance, and technology engagements. Okay, internal auditors may provide limited or reasonable assurance depending on the nature, timing, and extent of procedures performed. So, okay, so even the Institute of Internal Auditors is saying, hey, you know what? We only provide reasonable assurance. It is not absolute by any stretch of the imagination. By any stretch of the imagination, are we providing absolute assurance of anything? Okay, so let's go back to how we started this. First, I asked, is an auditor's job to always find something wrong? I say that the answer to that is unequivocally no, it is not always our job. Can it happen? Sure, absolutely. Can there be situations where nothing is wrong? Sure, absolutely. But again, when I was giving a presentation, I asked, how many of you got into the profession to finger point and find something wrong? And only one person in the room raised their hand and said yes. But when we dug down a little bit deeper, this individual really got into the profession because she said she wanted to help make things better. And she figured if she could find things that were wrong, then she could help solve problems, which would help make things better. Now, I would venture to guess that that is the reason most of us got into this profession. We've had a few people here through thumbs up and other emojis agree that they got into this profession to help make things better. So our takeaways for today, we were going to define assurance, which we did. We were going to explore why we have assurance wrong for those of us who believe that an auditor's job is to always find something wrong. You've got that all wrong. So we defined assurance. We explored what it takes to be able to provide assurance, some elements of assurance. Then we talked about some definitions from some regulatory or standard setting bodies, shall I say, and how they defined assurance, which was very interesting as well. Then we also defined, or we're in the middle now of defining what assurance really is. So here's what I want to know from you. What do you think assurance is when you hear someone is providing some assurance? What do you think that means? And what do you think that is? And while I give a few moments for some people to type that into the chat, and Clarence, are you still here while you're on vacation in the Bahamas? You should not still be here, man. Are you still here? But while I'll give a few minutes for anyone who wants to answer that, and I've gotten a few private messages since I've been on right now too, so I won't mention those. But while you all are doing that, I'm going to say that curiosity is the cornerstone of internal auditing, which means that as an auditor, you have to know how to ask really good questions. I don't care what type of auditor you are. If you cannot ask good questions, you can kiss your career goodbye. That is why I'm going to refer you to my best-selling book, Ask Better Questions, Get Better Answers, Perform Better Audits. It's all about the art of asking questions while auditing. Pick up your copy on Amazon. Go to askgetperform.com. Oh, Clarence says he's still here. He's actually at a conference. Look at that. In Freeport? Man, what kind of conference is that? Send me the details so I can go next year, man. You he said that they are on a break. Well, you know what? I'm so glad I caught you on a break, man. I am so glad I caught you on a break. Now, Abraham says we can't provide a guarantee, but we can provide assurance. Abraham, I'll take it a step further. We can't really provide assurance if you look at the definition of assurance by itself, which is why we provide reasonable assurance. Because when you provide assurance, that kind of infers that it's absolute. Back to what you said, we can't guarantee. 100% agree with you there, sir. And if you just joined, then you need to go back and listen to the beginning because we gave a lot of definitions. So I do agree with you. But the next time you have that conversation with someone, if you want to be able to back up what you're saying, go back and listen to the beginning, unless you've been here from the beginning, my friend. But yeah, spot on, man. Spot on. I'm still curious about this conference Clarence is at. So look, for those of you listening on the podcasting platform, if Clarence gives us an answer before it's over, you'll be able to hear what conference he's at so that you can go next year too. Because I'm I'm already booking my ticket. Abraham says, true. Yeah, man. Yeah. Most of us, I said this, and I don't know how long you've been here, Abraham, but I said earlier, auditors are typically really good people because no matter what's happening, we want to find out the truth, which means oftentimes we put our own feelings aside to try and find out whatever the truth is. We're accustomed to trying to listen, sort through some facts, and then figure out what the real truth is in most situations. Okay, so now I'm going to give you my definition of what it means to actually be an assurance provider. As an assurance provider, oh, okay. Clarence says he's at a conference not related to work. Darn it, it's not an auditing conference. So auditors, we won't be going to the Bahamas for a conference. Okay, so listen. Now, I'm going to give you my definition of assurance. When we are providing assurance, it means that we are analyzing information to provide our stakeholders with reasonable assurance of one of three things. One of three things. We want to provide them with reasonable assurance that things are either exceeding the expectation, meeting the expectation, or below the expectation. That is the primary goal that we're working towards. Let me give you an example, because some people are scratching their heads like, this kind of makes sense, but what are you really saying? So when we go in and audit an area, it doesn't matter what the area is. Let's just assume that we're auditing vending machines, and our goal is to ensure that the right number of snacks are in the vending machine, and we are looking for 30 items. If the snack machine has 35 items in it, it has exceeded what we've expected the outcome to be. So that's like, oh, well, wait a minute. You've exceeded the expectation here. Oops. Or if we go in and we expect 30 and we find 30, ooh, this has met the expectation. Or if we expect to see 30 and there are only 20 snacks in the snack machine, it is below expectation. And so we report that and say, here's why it's below expectation. Here's some things you can do to improve the process. So assurance providers are not always looking for something. You are looking for the truth. The truth is how many snacks are in the snack machine. The result, based on the information you gather, could exceed expectation, it could meet expectation, or it could be below expectation. But it is our job to report that back to the stakeholders, because now we've given them reasonable assurance that either A, hey, there are too many snacks in the snack machine, we don't know why. Or B, yep, they're the right number of snacks in the snack machine, everything is okay. Or C, oops, snack machine continuously falls short, we need to improve the processes. So no matter what all these other definitions say, at the end of the day, We're here to provide our stakeholders with some reasonable assurance that the processes that they're responsible for having governance oversight of either exceed expectations, meet expectations, or are below expectations. I welcome your comments, your rebuttals, your agreement at this particular point, because I think that we make things so entirely difficult that now we've pigeonholed ourselves. Now, I started off by saying I was at a conference when I was doing a presentation and someone said, hey, they believe that the job of an auditor is to always find something. And it was only one person in the entire room that believed that. Now, we had some questions come in because it was a hybrid event. And so we had some questions come in from the people that were online only. And one of the questions was, how do we change the mindset of our stakeholders? Because they believe that we always have to find something. Now, would you like to hear how I answered that question? Because I could do an entire episode on that, but I have a very quick answer to that. If you'd like to hear the answer to that, let me know. Give me a yes, I want to know, I'm interested, or something like that. Now, Marsha says, assurance from assure to say what we're doing, you can take it to the bank. Yeah, it really is just, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Now, Marsha was like, yep, I want to hear it. Clarence says, yes. Now, you all have to realize, I've said this before, I'm a very simple guy. I don't like things that are overly complicated. Too many complications bring confusion and stupidity. We get stupid when things are too complicated. So, if you work for an organization and that's the stigma, either in your internal auditing department or for the management team at your organization, you have three things that you can do. One of three things that you can do. The first is you can attempt to be a leader. You can attempt to be a leader. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you can attempt to change that stigma within your organization. Now, that's going to be an uphill battle, and that's going to need for you to be in a position of authority in order to make that change happen. So that's the first thing that you can do. You can attempt to be a leader and lead the change in your organization, especially when your clients say, oh God, you're just here to tell me what we've done wrong. Because I'll tell you, when that happened to me and a client said, you're just here to tell us what we did wrong, I said, no, that's not my job. And they said, well, what is your job? And I said, we may find something wrong. However, our job is to assess what you're doing and to provide you and stakeholders with reasonable assurance of one of three things. Either A, things are operating as intended and just keep doing what you're doing. B, things are exceeding expectations here. Or C, things are really, really bad. That is our job. We may find something or we may not find something. So first thing you can do if you find yourself in that situation is you can lead the change by changing the stigma in your organization. The second thing you can do is you can do it from a follower standpoint and just be that change that you want to see within your organization. Now, if it's really bad, your organization is probably not going to change, which leads me to my third reason or third thing that you can do, and that's go. If the culture is that bad to where you're not happy in your role and you can't do anything to change it, go find a place that is more in line with your morals, ethics, and values. We always forget that that is an option. So listen, I want to thank you all for joining me on episode number 63 of Audit Bites. Some auditors have assurance all wrong. If you enjoyed this episode, point your friends to this episode so that they can listen to it too. And again, thank you for joining me. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching this episode of Audit Bites. If you receive value from this podcast, do us a favor. First, tell other auditors. Second, give us a 5-star review. And finally, talk to Robert about training your auditors. Our contact information is on our website, www.thatauditguy.com. It's also where you will find our course catalog, on-demand courses, a kick butt blog, other podcasts, Robert's best-selling books, and last but not least, audit merch. That's right, we have audit hats, shirts, mugs and more. Thanks for watching and listening. See you next episode.